All right, thanks everybody. It's always a pleasure and an honor to be here with you all at Parker Hannifin. Not only, global leader in motion control technology and engineering, but also in health. I believe that your executives and leadership here are incredibly forward-thinking and innovative with regard to their strategic investments in your health as a workforce. I think, I always tell people, look, I'm an Appalachian root doctor who went to medical school. That's what defines me. I've traveled the world, learned from elders and elders, and centenarians and traditional healers and traditions, simple traditional strategies at health and wellness. And I've come back home to apply those both in my clinical practice, but also at the grocery store level, our food supply as Chief Medical Officer of Heinen's. And really the Heinen's Dr. Todd partnership was born in our traditional, typical, suggestions from all levels of the workforce, when a really amazing wellness consultant over at Som Center Heinen's called me at my practice and said, "Hey, Dr. Todd, do you want to do a talk on healthy food at Heinen's?" I said, "Absolutely, I love Heinen's." That wellness consultant is here with us today. That's Carla. She's back there, along with the rest of the rock stars from Heinen's. And for those of you that haven't yet heard, I think probably everybody has, that we're opening a store in downtown Cleveland. And Carla and her team, Joe and John from the store here in Mayfield, will be kicking that off for us. And so we're really excited, to have them here with us today and to have you all here to hear what it is we have to say about health and wellness through food. I think one of the things that I want to mention before we even get started, though, is I understand that you all got your biometrics recently, and we're going to weave that into this as best we can. But as most biometrics programs, I think nationally and even internationally, there could be some improvements. All right. So at Heinen's, the biometrics that we track are exactly these that we'll be talking about, and we're rolling those out at area corporations through the Heinen's Dr. Todd partnership, one of the first of which obviously is your very own Parker Hannifin. And so while this year's biometrics aren't as reflective of this as we want them to be, this process will hopefully evolve as it is with other area businesses as we inform ways to improve metrics and tracking of metrics and improve those metrics through diet and lifestyle interventions. And then the last thing that I'd like to mention is that, Heinen's is your area grocer, right? We have this shared vision that the grocery store is the doctor's office of the future. Ideally, right, we'll feed people healthfully, teach about healthy diet and lifestyle interventions and strategies. We won't need the doctor's offices, right? And that's our strategy. And so my point in mentioning that to you is that every one of our stores has a wellness consultant that's been enabled by me, personally trained by me, to help you with a lot of this kind of stuff. Make healthy diets, eat yourself super, and supplement, smart supplementation recommendations to you. So I'd encourage each and every one of you to reach out to that wellness consultant at your area Heinen's so that you could really benefit fully from all the information and programming that we've developed together. All right. So without further ado, know your numbers and eat yourself super and smart supplementation strategy to optimal health and wellness. Know your numbers, right? Your numbers don't lie. Your biometrics don't lie. Before we get into some of the specifics, I want to give you some basics on understanding your health, right? And actually, I'll mention also that we have some collaterals for this presentation. They're working their way around. I'll start with the worksheet. So this worksheet is kind of follows along with these drivers of compromised disease and certain biometrics that you could use to track those. It's got places for you to enter your own personal values of those relevant labs or metrics. And it's got salient interventions for both food and smart supplementation, or Eat Yourself Super, and smart supplementation that you can kind of glean from the presentation and fill out. So it's like a personalized kind of application of this stuff just for you. Now, I will mention that, like I said, you might not have all of the relevant blood levels from your biometrics, but either your primary care doctor or maybe past lab record, or you could come over to our facility and we could draw them for you if you'd like. And so you got the worksheet. In addition to the worksheet, you have some of our collaterals from Heinen's. You have my Superfoods Pyramid, which my book, Eat Yourself Super, walks you up every step of the way and talks about all of these things: nutritional deficiencies, chronic inflammation, fat toxicity, sugar toxicity, stressors, ways to mitigate or reduce those, and optimal health and wellness strategies. Our Smart Supplementation Pyramid, okay? And it also has the other two collaterals are healthy eating recommendations. So you take this to Heinen's with you, and smart supplementation recommendations. You can take this as well for your consultation meeting with the wellness consultants. And then lastly, but not leastly, my book, which has all of this information in it. If you have any questions or whatnot, you could reach out to me at the practice or one of the Heinen's wellness consultants or whatnot, and we have all kinds of tools for you. All right, so 5 important drivers of compromised health. These are the main things that drive the majority of morbidity and mortality in our culture. Compromised nutrition, right? Leading to deficiencies, nutritional deficiencies, fat toxicity, sugar toxicity, and stress and stressors. They all work together and drive chronic inflammation, all right? So all of these are incredibly important in our health, and each one of these will be considered, you know, kind of as we follow. So the nutritional deficiencies, how? Because people are eating plenty, right? I mean, how are they nutrient deficient when we're one of the most obese nations in the world? People are eating plenty, but they're actually starving. That's a part of the reason why they're eating plenty, right? Because our bodies don't get satiated from calories. They get satiated from nutrients. Bodies seek out nutrients in nature because we need certain things, right? And if there's a relative paucity or a void of those nutrients in the food people are consuming, they'll keep consuming as their body seeks those nutrients, and that's a problem. There's no food in the food. People are subsisting now on a calorie-rich but nutrient-sparse diet. We need to flip that. Nutrient-rich, calorie-sparse is what we want. We don't want calorie-rich, nutrient-sparse. Part of the reason for this, right, is because all these things are refined. You got highly refined sugars and highly refined flours, the majority of our caloric intake. And it drives, you know, overconsumption of calories and underconsumption, under-delivery of nutrients. So in addition to the poor eating habits, we've depleted soils, right? Our topsoils are becoming eroded and depleted. There's intensive agricultural processes that are driving less nutritious foods. The need for growing things faster, you know, also drives the use of herbicides, pesticides, larvicides, and fungicides, and all these things that are just nasty for us, bad for you, heavy metals, so on and so forth, and leading to toxic burden. So in some levels, not only are we getting less nutrients, we're also being exposed to toxins that our bodies don't want. So the effect of this really is compromised physiology and disease. Decreased energy, decreased immunity, decreased cognition, brain fog, right? Decreased aptitude, not being able to accomplish your full potential. These are some of the early stage kind of indicators of these things can actually really drive disease. Chronic inflammation cause. excessive fats, excessive sugars, acidic processed foods, with regard to the food, right? Stress also drives inflammation and nutritional deficiency and all these other kind of things. But the effect of chronic inflammation really is the gamut of the diseases of civilization: heart disease, diabetes, cancer, etc. You name it. Now, inflammation is good. We need it. You scrape your elbow or twist an ankle, get infected by something, the body becomes inflamed to deal with those problems, right? But the problem happens when there's no anti-inflammatory balance, right? So in other words, if there's pro-inflammation or chronic inflammation, disease results. It's like a balance, like a teeter-totter, right? With inflammation on the one side and anti-inflammation on the other. If your body becomes inflamed to heal something, you want it to cool back off. So they're like perpetual inflammatory fires burning that drive all of these diseases. Fat toxicity. Cause excessive dietary fats, including omega-6 fats, which result from dietary preponderance of cereal grains. Now, so there's two main issues with fat toxicity, right? One is we're just eating too much fat. Similarly to sugar. How is this happening? Okay. Our ancestors ate diets predominantly 80% carbohydrates, 10 to 15% proteins, and 5 to 10% fats. That's their diet in nature, right? And if you think about the places in nature where sugars and fats occur naturally, right? Sugars in balanced packets in fruits and sucrose, which is a glucose fructose molecule bound, and complex carbohydrates like pectins, amylopectins, starches, right? That's where we get that stuff in nature, and it's really in a physiologically friendly, appropriate form, right? It's not high fructose corn syrup, concentrated fructose, which is really bad for you. It's not highly refined sucrose or toxic loads of glucose. It's balanced in nature. Similarly with fats, right? Tree nuts, greens, everything's got membrane fats and fats in that, right? And our ancestors needed these things, the sugars and the fats, so they sought them out and they got them in nature. They got them in fruits and vegetables and nuts and tree nuts, greens, and things that ate those, right? And because we needed those things, our ancestors sought those out. It was an evolutionary drive to survive. So we sought them out in nature, and when we found them, we ate them. But now that sugars and fats, those evolutionary drivers, are available in highly refined, highly processed forms, we consume them, but we keep consuming them. On whole, people are addicted to sugars and fats because ancestrally we were drawn to them for survival, but they were never available on a highly refined kind of basis. So that overconsumption really drives a lot of the diseases. So overconsumption of fats, body takes in so much fat, doesn't know what to do with it, stores it in the vascular linings, drives inflammation, drives heart disease, drives heart attacks, drives strokes, drives microvascular compromise, early dementia, all those cognitive changes, from this. Now the other problem, so the too much fat's one problem. The other problem is the kinds of fat. You've all heard essential fatty acids, 369, 369, 369, right? Well, they're essential because our bodies can't make them. Bodies can't make them, so you need to get them from your diet. Now, we could make essential fatty acids 9 from the 3s and the 6s. So forget about the 9s for a second. The 3s and the 6s are the essentials. Now, our ancestors ate these things on a ratio of 1 to 1. They're balanced on that teeter-totter, on that seesaw. And it's important because though they're both essential, they both have drastically different functions in the human body. The 3s are anti-inflammatory, whereas the 6s are pro-inflammatory. They lead to all of the inflammatory mediators in our body. So whereas our ancestors ate them on a 1-to-1 ratio, modern man and woman with the standard American diet, hereinafter referred to as the SAD, is consuming these more on a 1-to-30, 1 part 3 to like 30 part 6s, perpetual pro-inflammation, right? And not only, is this the excess fat, but the kinds that drives disease. How did this happen, right? So the 3s and 6s, they occur in nature pretty much together, although some foods have higher ratios. Some foods have more 6 relative to 3s, and others have more 3s relative to 6. So the ones that have a lot of 3s are seeds and greens. Seeds and greens, right? And that was the bulk majority of our diets, seeds and greens. If people were eating animals, they ate the ones that ate seeds and greens too, right? It's the complete opposite now in the modern lifestyle. Wheat, corn, rice, and barley, those are cereal grains. Those are caryopses. The seed of these things is actually more rich in 6 relative to 3. So not only are the majority of humanity subsisting on these plants, but they're feeding them to animals and then eating those. So the dietary preponderance of omega-6 fats is coming from everywhere, and it's driving inflammation. So more 3, less 6. That's the moral of the story, right? The effect of this fat toxicity is inflammation. Omega-6 fats are precursors to inflammatory mediators in our body. Sugar toxicity, very similarly, right? The body takes in so much sugar, doesn't know what to do with it. So it sticks the sugar, just like if you were to open a can of pop, pour it on the ground, let it dry. You'd walk on it, it'd be tacky, right? Shoe would stick to it. That's what it does to your body. Body takes in so much sugar, doesn't know what to do with it, sticks it on proteins and cellular membranes, cells, makes them sticky, drives inflammation. And it further confounds and makes worse the fat toxicity issue. So they feed in hand, and drive inflammation, cause disease. This process of these sugar adducts being stuck to proteins and cells is called glycation. Glycation drives disease. So here's some things that we could follow, right? Blood doesn't lie. Here's some key measures. There are actually 8 that I use routinely in clinical practice, in addition to the basics. The basic CBC, D, and CMP measures of your blood cells and their health and integrity, measure of ions and whatnot in the body, and liver health, kidney health, things like that. In addition to those, I really focus on some of these. Like, everybody hears cholesterol, right? What isn't just cholesterol? It's the ratios. It's how things are happening in the body. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Fasting insulin and hemoglobin A1C are incredibly important. And we'll talk about why. So this is really interesting. As you go down this list, ferritin, CRP, uric acid, vitamin D, and TSH, these things that I look at, and then of course BMI, or body mass index, is a measure of how much you weigh to height. Really, waist, truncal measurements are very important, because our fat cells, they actually produce things that we don't want them to be producing. In addition, it's dehydrated tissue. It drives a lot of disease. The more fat or adipose tissue, the more issues. So we follow these blood metrics and this BMI. But these blood metrics, what's interesting is that they could be grouped by those aforementioned drivers of compromised health. In other words, nutritional deficiency, certain ones show that. Chronic inflammation, certain ones show that. Fat toxicity, certain ones show that. And sugar toxicity, so on and so forth. And here's the specifics. Now, the nutritional deficiency, the actual map, the best one is a hair analysis. These are the basics: CBCD, blood tests, and CMPs. But the hair analysis is really a state-of-the-art thing. We run some programs here and stuff. How many of y'all have had a hair analysis? It's very telling, isn't it? It's kind of interesting. If you were to eat your food from one plot of land for like 3 to 6 months and then get a hair analysis and do a test of the soil, guess what? If the soil is deficient in something, you would be too. Very interesting. So some recommendations for nutritional deficiencies really is the mantra of what we're talking about today. And so it's really just the Eat Yourself Super and then Smart Supplementation strategy. My Eat Yourself Super strategy, for those of you that haven't seen me speak on that in particular, it's all in the book, but it's basically to integrate plant-based, calorie-sparse, nutrient-dense greens, rainbow veggies and fruits, balanced proteins, omega-3 fats, and functional foods into your daily plate. That's really what the superfoods pyramid, works to demonstrate. And again, the book kind of walks you up each path to that. And in addition to that, just because of the challenges of modern day living, the stress and the stressors, nutrient depleted soils, and so on, I advocate for smart supplementation regime as well. You have certain metabolic requirements that are hard to meet just through food because of all these other things. Like, for example, iodine. Right? Your ancestors got it from sea vegetables. They ate lots and lots of it. How many of you all eat kelp every day? You should. Those of you that aren't, take an iodine supplement. All right. Now, so these essentials are multivitamin with B12, iodine, vitamin D3, DHA, and probiotics. Kind of just talk briefly about each one of those. Multi with B12, nutrient-depleted soils. We need B12. Historically, you always hear, you get B12 from animal products, right? Isn't that what you've been told? Yeah. How many of y'all have been told that? Raise your hands. Right? So the next time anybody tells you that, you say, really? Where does the cow get it from? Does the cow eat cows to get B12? I've never seen it. The answer is it's in the soil, right? But it's a little bit more complicated than that, right? It comes down to the fact that our ancestors had more soil in their food, the little good dirt in our food. Now in the modern day, we do this hyper, cleaning of everything, and so you're not getting the homeostatic soil organisms your body needs to complex these things. What happens is that cobalt, which is a trace mineral in the soil, is complexed by microorganisms into cyanocobalamin, which is basically vitamin B12, right? And things that transiently colonize our bowel flora from mouth to anus, from the foods that we eat and the homeostatic soil organisms therein, grow these microbacteria that make and manufacture B12. And so that's the problem. Now, in a nation where most people are eating, a majority of their diet is meat, there's still a tremendous epidemic of vitamin B12 deficiency now. And the reason for that is because actually the animals are becoming B12 deficient as well because of the fact that cobalt is missing from the soil now. So what I love about speaking to engineers, you get the periodic chart, right, in and out. And you start to look at these things on there and think about them, how they function in terms of physiology. It becomes very interesting. So I recommend a multi with B12, iodine, vitamin D3 we haven't talked about yet. Vitamin D, really comes down to the fact that our ancestors spent a lot more time outside with a lot less clothes on. So we all need to be spending a lot more time outside with a lot less clothes on. Everybody's looking like it's like 1 degree outside right now. Well, there's good news for you, because right now we're at perihelion, which means the sun is the closest to the planet this time of year in January. It's actually paradoxical to think that you spend less time out, but you still get what you need, and so on and so forth. Anyway, point is this. There's a nationwide epidemic of vitamin D deficiency, and it's because we live in a house with a roof and wear clothes, and so the solution, right, have your D levels checked, make sure they're optimized, include these smart supplements. DHA, algal DHA, incredibly important brain and eye health. sea veggies again. We would get these in part, but it's also related to the omega-6 and 3 debacle, really. DHA is the longest of the omega-3 fats. And so, what happens is your body has these omega-3 and 6 fats that are metabolized into their mediators, and they share this enzyme that does that. And because you have all these 6s, very few 3s, the 6s are getting metabolized into the inflammatory mediators, whereas the 3s are not. Plus, they're not getting metabolized into what you need for brain and eye health. So I tell everybody, 3.5 grams of plant-based omega-3 fats a day, chia flax, walnuts are some top picks, plus a little bit of extra algal DHA, all that's on your handout, your smart supplementation handout. And you want regular smoothies, greens, chia, flax, plant-based proteins. Chronic inflammation, here's some measures, right? Ferritin and CRP, these rise with inflammation. They're being elevated over time is indicative of chronic inflammation, right? Ferritin is also a measure of iron in your body. Now, biometrics. Here's where some of this starts to tie in, all right? Uric acid, right, is indicative of gout, been linked to cardiovascular disease and high blood pressure, right? Yet, diets high in animal products, animal protein, you get uric acid elevation. One of the first things I do for people that come in to see me with high blood pressure, the basics, eat yourself super, smart supplementation, optimize the D and the B12, right? Plant-based proteins, right? Start watching the uric acid levels. As they drop, you can get them off of their medications. It's important to realize that what we put into our body is what we get out of it. And as you track these and make your dietary changes, you see real results. I have thousands and thousands of patients, and I don't use any of these pharmaceutical drugs. The first thing I do is get people off of them, get them on the right food and herbs. And I have the healthy levels for you, so the healthy ferritin levels, healthy CRP. Now, ferritin and CRP, these rise with inflammation, but they could be transiently up, and so elevated levels chronically are indicative of chronic inflammation. Uric acid, as I had said, and the recommendations, greens. Greens are actually anti-inflammatory. The principal green pigment in greens, chlorophyll, is anti-inflammatory, all right? So you want to eat more greens. Omega-3 fats, chia, flax, certain nuts and seeds. If you're eating animals and animal products, you want to make sure that those are healthfully, wild-fed animal. They're eating seeds and greens too. But still minimize frequency and portion, because make no mistake, the gold standard diet in health is a low-fat, plant-based diet for a lot of different reasons. Alkaline foods, which are really plant foods, right? Smart supplementation, D, probiotics, omega-3s, and DHA are all important in chronic inflammation. In addition, turmeric, curcumin is another great one, and the uncarine alkaloids in cat's claw also have some very interesting effects. Fat toxicity, here are your measures, right? So you have some of these in your biometrics. So a lot of the biometrics data, it kind of looks at your BMI, looks at blood pressure, right, which is driven by these kind of things. It also looks at lipids, right, so cholesterol, lipid ratios, and things like that. And again, it's not just the total level, it's these ratios. So the ratios that I look at with the cholesterol and lipids really is, in principle, I look at total cholesterol to HDL ratios. You really want this to be less than 4 or even closer to 3, Triglycerides to HDL is another great ratio. You want that below 2. And there's even another one that I'll give you if you want, is the total cholesterol and the triglycerides. Your triglycerides shouldn't be more than half. And if you're having some issues here, really think about this for a second. Well, there's two things. First, your body makes cholesterol in the liver. Right? Your body makes all the cholesterol you need in your liver. Right? If the cholesterol ratios are off, as in there's too much or these ratios are screwy, two things. The first thing is you want to look if you're taking exogenous cholesterol into your diet. And if you are, you need to curb that. Cholesterol comes from things that have livers, right? You make it, they make it. So that's the first thing. Cut the exogenous cholesterol. The second thing is you need to flush the liver, because what happens really is the whole process of cleaning your body and your blood is cholesterol works along with other aspects of your physiology to fix, repair, and promote membrane fluidity and stability. It's all important, but when there's too many of lipids, including cholesterol, there are some issues, right? And the various various lipid particles and their ratios to one another are reflective of whether or not, when the gunk comes back to your liver, if it's being cleaned or not. And so people's, and this is just kind of like a high-level discussion, is really particle size and all this other stuff comes into play. But first I tell people with cholesterol and lipid ratios that are off, I say, look at dietary source of exogenous cholesterol and cut them down. That's the first thing. The next thing is if the ratios are off and telling, do a liver flush, a cleanse, support your liver health. Okay? And then the third thing is you really want to dig in the nitty-gritty, start to look at particle size and things like that in reducing long-term cardiovascular disease risk markers. And that gets a little bit more in depth. Some of the recommendations also include, as I had said, minimizing the fats and the oils, omega-3s, less 6s similarly, plant nut fats as we had discussed, including animal products in the diet. First start with a healthy animal and minimize frequency and portion. Eliminate trans fats. They're not food. They're actually plastic. And as we had said, cleansing, flush the liver. Some supplements that are important here are iodine. We're going to talk about why that is with regard to fat toxicity subsequently here. Probiotics, matcha, your omega-3s and DHA. Remember, it's kind of all on this little crib sheet for you. Sugar toxicity, right? Similarly to the fat toxicity, the body's taking in so much sugar, doesn't know what to do with it. Some levels that we follow are insulin and hemoglobin A1C. So the insulin is a protein whose job is to get, so basically, things that you eat get broken down into its sugars, right? If it gets broken down into its sugars fast, it spikes the blood sugar, right? That's why if you eat things like bread and pasta and stuff like that right after, you get tired, right? So if you eat these high glycemic foods or high sugar loads, the blood sugar concentration goes up, insulin comes out, the protein, to do its job to get the sugar into the cells. Now, there's two things to this, right? There's the amount of sugar you're consuming, and there's the need for it, because sugars are cellular energy provider. If you're eating foods with carbohydrates and or sugars that are broken down into more sugars, the carbohydrates, and your body doesn't need those, in other words, you're not exercising or you have a relative excess of sugar, and the insulin comes out, tries to do its job, but there's still more sugar. It's not being utilized with exercise. It's stuffing sugar into cells when it shouldn't. The cells are saying no. They're getting, they're shutting off their receptors to insulin, developing what's called insulin resistance, which is, the insulin starts to go up. And, it's kind of a dysmetabolic picture that happens from constant ongoing sugar toxicity. Now, the next part to this, right, is the hemoglobin A1C, which is actually a measure of those glycosylated proteins. So remember I said that your body takes in so much sugar, eventually doesn't know what to do with it, starts sticking it on everything. one of the things that it sticks to is your hemoglobin. It's a protein, and this is actually a measure of glycosylated hemoglobin. So in biometrics, people used to look at glucose. A lot of groups still are, I think ours included. But the better measure is this, because rather than just a one point in time measurement of glucose, you get a running average over the last 3 months, which is what this is. So by looking at the glycosylated hemoglobin, you could say, your blood sugar has been, 130, right? You could get averages, right, that are extrapolated, which are very important. So we want people's hemoglobin A1C to be ideally lower than 5.6, and that is kind of a long-term reflective measure of the glycosylated hemoglobin. If it's not, what do you need to do? Eliminate fructose, minimize simple sugars and processed carbohydrates, refine wheat, rice, corn products, aim for lower glycemic foods, and even include anti-glycating foods, so things that disassemble those sugar moieties from the proteins, right? Like blueberries and yacon, which are really amazing, minimizing whole grains, wheat, rice, corn, barley, and substituting sprouted grains, because grains have these backpacks of sugar. When you sprout them, you utilize that and make them a lower glycemic kind of delivery. The supplements that are important: iodine, probiotics, maca, matcha, and gymnema. Again, with the sugar toxicity, we'll talk about why iodine is important. We talked a little bit about this already. Moving down the key blood metrics, second to last here, although not second to last in importance, it's vitamin D, right? And what it comes down to is we're not outside in the sun like our ancestors. What happens is, who knows what the father of all of our hormones is? Yeah, who said that? All right. Yeah, cholesterol is the father of all our hormones. So we need it. We need cholesterol, but we need it to get turned into the stuff that it gets turned into, right? One of the things that gets turned into, but not enough, because we're not exposed to the sun, is D, right? Since vitamin D is actually a hormone, not a vitamin, because it's made inside of our bodies. What happens is cholesterol floats up in the form of 7-dehydrocholesterol to our skin. It's irradiated by UVB and soaks back into the body where it's subsequently activated, right, to activated D. Once activated, vitamin D is responsible for the epigenetic regulation of 10 to 15% of your genome. So pretty much everything about you has something to do with vitamin D. Incredibly important, incredibly important. Yet, for the most part, everyone is deficient. And so get the levels checked and make sure those are optimized. Once optimized, vitamin D is incredibly potent at disease risk reduction. We'll take a look at some of those. What we look at is the 25-hydroxy-D level, and we tell people to aim for an absolute minimum of 60. Absolute minimum. And the way and really what we do then is we say, okay, if it's not, we give mega doses until it's at least 60, really aiming for 80 so that it doesn't fall below 60, and then supplement daily with 6,000 to 8,000 IUs a day. But the mega doses are almost 500,000. That's how deficient people are. Now, remember, 20 minutes outside in the sun, 20 minutes outside with sensible sun exposure, your body's going to produce 20 to 30,000 IUs of vitamin D. So multiply that out the whole day, 750,000, to 1 million IUs a day. Multiply that out the whole week, millions. That's how deficient people are. The unfounded trepidation with regard to vitamin D repletion out there is ludicrous. It's driving disease all over our culture. Now, the therapies that we use at our clinic for the megadose repletion are actually adaptations from therapies they use in Germany and Australia and widespread. So this is what we do here. So healthful sun exposure, optimize the D level with megadoses, then take roughly, there's a couple thousand IUs in your multi, so an extra 5. So, roughly the body uses 6,000 to 8,000 IUs of vitamin D a day in health. Uses 6,000 to 8,000 IUs a day in health. How many of y'all know somebody that's pregnant? Yeah, pregnant ladies should be taking 4,000 IUs of vitamin D a day. 4,000 IUs of vitamin D. Breastfeeding, 6,000 IUs of vitamin D. There's great studies out there that, are clearly indicative of this, yet doctors aren't even telling people that. It's so important. Advise people to do their research on it. And then, okay. So with an optimized vitamin D, optimized D levels, emerging scientific literature suggests apparent risk reduction greater than 70% for cancers across the board. It's like 77%. Greater than 80%, it's really like 83% breast cancer. 60% diabetes type 1, and that's important because that's the inflammatory type, which can be extrapolated to other autoimmune diseases and issues and things like that. 50% MS, 30% heart attacks, and the list goes on. It's just incredibly important. Incredibly important. As I said, it's responsible for the epigenetic regulation of 10 to 15% of our genome. It isn't about genetics anymore, it's epigenetics. How our environmental interconnection works with us to regulate our genomes and health, adapt to and deal with stress and stressors. I want to talk just a little bit here and kind of finishing up on the thyroid. Our thyroid, it's a gland that sits at the base of our neck. And the thyroid is thyros, the Greek word thyros for shield. It's our body's life shield, right? The thyroid, with its hormones, tells every cell in our body how quickly to consume oxygen and producing energy for whatever its cellular function is. So if it's a hormone cell, produce hormones. It's a brain cell, long-term potentiation or memory, right? And so on and so forth. Skeletal muscle cell, energy for mechanical work. And the list goes on. It's our thermostat. So the thyroid makes hormones that tell every cell that. The problem with this whole system right now is that the thyroid's precursor or raw material to make those hormones includes iodine, right? So we need iodine for our thyroid gland to make the thyroid hormones, tell every cell in our body how quickly to consume oxygen and producing energy. Our immune cells, right? Our endocrine cells, our hormone cells, our memory cells, all of this stuff, right? If the thyroid's slow, weight gain, cold hands and feet, sluggish, mental fog, constipation, right? There's 76 million Americans, or more even now, on Synthroid, which is a pharmaceutical thyroid hormone. Really, those people, for the most part, are just missing their raw material. They need their raw material. That's the optimal solution. Feed the body the things it needs to produce the hormones that it needs to produce to do its job correctly. And like I said, all of your ancestors got that in the food that they ate. Seaweed, sea vegetables, root vegetables. That's the major sources for these minerals, in particular iodine. Now, not only are we eating less iodine than our ancestors, here's a periodic chart where iodine is. I'll point to it. Not only are we eating less iodine, but there are other things that look like iodine but don't work like it in our food supply, right? Fluorine, which is a caustic neurotoxin, and chlorine, which forms all kinds of disinfection byproducts. They're both added to our water. Bromine is a preservative added to foods. So they all look like iodine, but they don't work like it in the body. They're goitrogenic antagonists. So the solution is eliminate toxins, get your iodine through sea veggies and supplementation and whatnot. And really the solution, as I'd said, eat yourself super. We want, with the food side of it, we want you to Oh, and by the way, let me mention this with the thyroid. As it's related to fat and sugar toxicity, fats and sugars, the sugars are cellular fuel, right? So we need energy to get up and go. Our body uses sugars. But if the thyroid's sluggish, it's not using what it should, right? It's getting deposited to fat, more fat. Fats are more like a long-term storage thing. But that's how this is relative. So if the thyroid is slow, weight gain. Big part of the problem that we're having. So incorporate superfoods, manage your fats, manage your sugars, know your source. My book will help, Superfoods Pyramid. Also our notes here, Wellness Center notes that are at all of your desks. Smart supplementation is the next step. First, the essentials, multi with B12 probiotics, iodine, DHA, and D3. So we talked about all those really except for the probiotics. We talked a little bit about them with homeostatic soil organisms. But just remember, your probiotics, they're like 100 trillion friends that you didn't even know you had. They live in your body from mouth to anus. They colonize every aspect of your alimentary canal. And what they do is they produce more bioavailable nutrients for you. They are inextricably intertwined with your immunity, strengthening it for you in relevant areas. They produce things for us. They promote healthy consistencies of blood. There's so many different things that they do. Right? Yeah, we're not getting that optimal flora because we're not getting those homeostatic soil organisms. We're not eating as many fermented type things as our ancestors. And there's another thing, overuse of antibiotics, right? So the antibiotics, they kill all things, the good and the bad. So at a minimum, if you're using antibiotics, you should make sure you put the good stuff back with a megadose of probiotics and then take your daily maintenance, as I recommend here in the Essentials. And then you have Essentials Plus. These are supplements that can help you deal with stress and stressors and chronic inflammatory things like curcumin or turmeric, right, is incredibly important, as I had mentioned. Some of these other ones, maca is an adaptogen, supports the thyroid and adrenal glands. Matcha it's a tonic, right? So it helps basically make energy available and helps your body utilize it. It's a thermogenic superfood. It also helps the body's production of relaxation state, incredibly important. It's high concentration of epigallocatechin gallate, which is one of the most powerful catechin antioxidants known to man, incredibly important. So maca, matcha, cat's claw, as I had mentioned, immunomodulatory, uncarine alkaloids, are incredibly important there. It's also antiviral, has a number of really amazing properties in helping to reset bowel health as well. B complex, important for a lot of different reasons, adrenal support. The B vitamins are basically coenzymes. They work with enzymes to do all kinds of things, methylation, acetylation, all these important physiologic things in our body. Resveratrol, incredibly important. In particular, of late, there's some great new science out that really irrefutably shows that it's important in cognitive health. It helps vascular health and integrity in the brain, which is probably why it helps elders with gait stability. Not only all of its cardiovascular risk reduction properties and proven heart health benefits and whatnot, very important. CoQ10, heart health. Zinc is another thing that we need in our immune system. And it also, as you can see here on the periodic chart, zinc looks very similar to some of these toxic heavy metals like mercury and cadmium. So not only are we getting less zinc, but you got all these other things that look like it don't work like it. And then the pillars. We want special focus on the digestive, hormonal, cardiovascular, immune, joint, cognitive, and purification detox. We could help you with that as we go. We're going to do some specific talks on each one of those pillars over the next year or two. And also spend some time with your local Heinen's Wellness consultant for general questions. We invite you all to become patients at our practice. We have an east side location right here in Lyndhurst and one in Rocky River. And in closing, pyramid, and some general eating tips. 3 things. First thing, salad a day. Right? Start with a salad a day, then a salad a meal, then make the salad the meal. Use greens. The greener the better, right? The hearty greens like kales, arugulas, chards, right? Then add your rainbow fruits and veggies and your balanced proteins, omega-3 fats, functional foods, fermented foods, sauerkrauts, kimchi. You could build a salad from the pyramid, right? These are the kind of salads that I'm talking about, not that packing iceberg lettuce stuff with gobs of nasty dressing, stuff that who knows what's in it, right? There's a lot of recipes in my book for simple dressings and things like that. Snacking, right? Snacking. The average American derives really like a half of their calories from snacking, right? So snack wisely. Make sure you're snacking on superfoods, right? Some of my favorites are sprouted seeds and nuts, kale chips. I love, some of the, amazing dehydrated greens, and there's so many things out there, and not to mention the entire gamut of the produce department, where you have, just an explosion of colors. So start thinking like that, and then proteins, right? So focus on plant-based proteins, legumes, nuts, quinoas, all these kind of things. And if including animal products in your diet, remember those key tenets that I talked to you about. Remember, start with healthy animal and minimizing frequency and portion. So the low-fat, plant-based diet is the gold standard in health. There's a lot, I know, but use tools and ask questions, and we'll be back. This is, you don't have to know everything right now. Take these tools, and we'll continue to grow our program, our screening programs, and continue to work with you all in applying, the simple solutions, that you can to meet you where you're willing to be met, to, work with you, as partners in your health. And before I conclude, financial disclosures. I am one of the 2 founding physicians of Great Lakes Health Institute. We have one in Lyndhurst, one in Rocky River. My nutritional roots and Dr. Todd Superfoods companies are available at Heinen's. Chief Medical Officer at Heinen's, Medical Director here at Parker, and a tenured Health Sciences Professor at CSU. So there you go. So by the way, this is just kind of a requirement. I want you to know that I do own those product lines, and for healthy, kind of choices. There's other lines that we have at Heinen's. We have some great ones. Some of my top picks are, in addition to nutritional roots, are Garden of Life. I like Life Extensions. I like New Chapter. I like, on the clinical side, MediHerb is really good. There are a number of great herbal companies out there like Herb Farm and Gaia, and there's a lot of good ones, right? I think really, our mantra at the grocery store has really been, let's take the guesswork out of all this, because there's so many different things out there. There's like 100,000 different multiple vitamin companies. We just have a few, and they're per my research and understanding, the better ones, right? And similarly at our practice, a group of doctors, we use a lot of the pharmaceutical grade kind of supplements and nutrients and nutraceuticals and whatnot available to doctors, and there's like differences in doses and things like that. So for general questions, I'd invite you all to visit Heinen's, your wellness consultants. For specific medical things, I'd invite you all to schedule an appointment to see me or one of the other doctors at our facility. We're all happy to serve you. We're happy to be partnered with Parker, and and I think that me being the doctor in the grocery store, the Heinen's Dr. Todd partnership, and our connection now with an amazing, Fortune 200 company is I think going to be, just as your leadership hopes and we hope, kind of a beacon in health and healthcare into the future. Because what we're doing here in Northeastern Ohio, we believe is going to revolutionize healthcare in the world. And so we're happy to be a part of that with you all. All right, so thanks everybody. Always a pleasure.